Peace be with you. So this question is asking whether people who have completely abandoned prayer, whether they are Muslims or not, even though they may call themselves Muslims. And as I have said in a previous video, I'm not in the business of telling people what they are. You know, people can call themselves by whatever label they want, but I do like for people to know what God says in the Quran. For us to better answer this question, I think it is necessary to break it down into its component parts. Firstly, linguistically, the word Muslim means someone that obeys God, someone that submits to God. So a person that is a Muslim should be in obedience to God. Second, when we say someone is a Muslim in a religious sense, we assume that this person is walking the straight path and they are going to heaven. And then we've got to take a look at the Quran and see if people who do not pray, if this is their destiny and what God says about that. So let's talk about the linguistic component first. If we take a look at the Quran in the second chapter, Surah Baqarah, verses 2 and 3, we are told this book, there is no doubt in it, is a guide for the muttaqeen, for people who are careful of their duty to God, those who believe in the unseen. And then God tells us, and keep up prayer, keep up salah, and spend out of what we have given them, give out of what we have given them. So a basic mark of people who are in submission to God, which is what the word Muslim means, they are careful of their duty to God, is that they keep up prayer. And this is just one mention, and I'm not going to mention other verses that talk about prayer for the sake of brevity. I don't want to make this video 7 hours, but the commandment repeats itself many times in the Quran. So if one does not observe prayer, they simply do not fit the description of people who are muttaqeen, who are careful of their duty to God, as they refuse even the basic acts of obedience to God, such as prayer. And I think such people can hardly be considered to be submitting or obeying God, even though they may call themselves Muslims. And that is what the word Muslim means. So people who do not pray linguistically certainly do not fit that description. The second part of the question is, can a person be successful without salah? Can a person be successful without prayer? And I think to answer that question, and before I go on, when I say the word successful, I mean, can you enter heaven? Can you walk with God without prayer? And to answer that question, I think we need to look at the purpose of prayer. In the Quran, God says that the greatest purpose of prayer is remembrance of God. And in the 29th chapter of the Quran, verse 45, we are told, and recite that which has been revealed to you from your Lord, and keep up prayer. Surely prayer keeps away from indecency and evil, and dhikr, remembrance of God, is akbar, is greatest. And God knows what you do. So it's very clear that prayer is essential for remembrance of God, for dhikr of Allah, right? And in fact, it is salah is the greatest purpose of salah is exactly that. So I think that the Quran is clear that without remembrance of God, we are unable to regulate our behavior, and without prayer, we are unable to remember God in a sufficient manner in order to regulate our behavior on a day-to-day basis. That is why we have to pray every day, several times a day, because this is a reset every single day. So prayer is a tool. This is what we're told. The prayer is a tool. It keeps us away from indecency and evil and helps us remember God. And if we refuse to even pick up a tool, can we truly be successful? And I think the answer is no. So even though you call yourself a Muslim, if you're not even picking up the basic of tool, a basic or showing the basic dedication to God, I think you should not expect to be successful in this life or the next, even though you are using a word that implies such success. That's not the only thing. I think that we can look at what else God says in the Quran about abandoning dhikr. And in the 43rd chapter in the Quran, verses 36 and 37, we're told, and whoever turns away from remembrance of dhikr, of the most merciful, we appoint for him a shaitan, a devil, so he becomes his associate. And most surely they turn him away from the path, and they think that they are guided. So if we abandon prayer, we abandon dhikr, and God tells us in the Quran, although we may see ourselves as Muslims, we have a devil as our constant companion, constantly speaking into our ear, telling us we're doing great, while we are walking astray, while we are not on Sirat al-Mustaqim, while we are not on the straight path. Although we may feel guided, we are certainly not fitting the definition of a successful person, i.e. a Muslim in Arabic, a person that obeys God. And also, I think it is important to recognize that our generation is not the first people that have made this mistake of abandoning salah. In the Quran, in the 19th chapter, verse 59, we are told, "But after them came an evil generation, an evil posterity, who neglected prayers and followed their desires, so they will meet damnation." So that tells us what happened to people before us. You know, these people, they call themselves Muslims, and they abandon prayer, and God tells us they will meet damnation, they will meet hell. That is the path they're walking on because they abandon prayers. And that's what this verse tells us. That is a consequence of abandoning prayer. And these people who make it to hell, they're going to be asked on Judgment Day, what has brought you into hell? And this is in the 74th chapter of the Quran, verses 40 through 47. We're told that people who have made it into the gardens, they will ask each other about the guilty, the mujrimeen. What has brought you into hell? They will say, we were not of those who prayed, and we did not feed the poor, and we talked vanities with the vain talkers, and we used to call the day of judgment a lie, until death came to us. So prayer is certainly in that explanation as one of the factors that led people to damnation, that led people to hell. So if you abandon prayer, not only are you replicating the mistake of the generations before us that we're told met damnation, but you are also fitting the description of people who, when they ask what brought you into hell, they will say, well, I didn't pray. So anyone can call themselves whatever they want. Anyone can call themselves a Muslim. But if we are honest with ourselves and we read what the Quran says about this topic, then we can see that whoever abandons prayer is not in obedience to God, and therefore the word Muslim does not describe them, and they are traveling the road with devil straight to hell. And since Muslims do not travel that road, they do not walk with the shaitan, they are not heading into hell, then people who do not pray but call themselves Muslims, do they really fit that word? And I really don't think that they do. So no matter who you are, if you consider yourself a Muslim after reading the Quran, it is simply foolish to think that you don't have to pray, that you can be successful without salah, which is a basic tool and a basic act of devotion to God. So if you don't want to help yourself and you want to face certain failure while calling yourself a Muslim, then you can abandon salah. Peace be with you.